Now, here we are in my gallery, and just to put into practice, to see how we've put into practice some of the painting techniques, we'll just have a look at this quilt, which is entitled Grass Trees. Now, the main area here, the purple area here, is one piece of fabric that's been painted to incorporate the rocky cliff. And remember, we talked about painting trees to go in the background. On this particular quilt, we've got quite a few trees that have been painted in the background and then just outlined with stitching. Moving around the gallery, in this particular quilt, we have lots of fabrics that have been painted for skies. We've got our sunset sky here, and once again, a lot of these fabrics have been painted, but this time they've been cut into small squares and stitched back together. Lots of different fabrics were painted for these segments and then cut up, carefully arranged and stitched back together again. You'll also see a lot of painted fabric in the water. Moving across even further, we have our Pandanus tree. Now, this was painted the same way we did in the demonstration. So the tree was drawn onto some white fabric, it was painted, cut out, and eventually made it to the surface of the quilt. For this quilt, I painted the background as one piece. Now, I had to be careful that I got it much darker on the outside, coming to lighter in the centre, just to give us a perspective. It was interesting painting some of the fabrics for the foliage. This very fine fabric, bright yellow fabric in the centre, is actually gauze bandage. I painted that so that I had a feeling of transparency, that you can see through the gauze bandage in various places to get the effect of the sky shining through. On this particular quilt, which is called Stroll along the Levy, I've once again painted my whole cloth background. To get the effect of the trees, I cut out some contact, the sticky paper that you use on covering exercise books. I cut out the tree shapes and stuck them to the surface. Then I washed the paint across the surface, and when I removed the contact, of course I had the image of the trees. Once again, I made the fabric darker at the bottom because that's closer to us, so we need the colours to be intensified. To finish off, I sponged some foliage back over the surface. Now, this quilt is based on the Kimberley area in the far northwest of Australia. We actually travelled there on a camping holiday, a camping safari, and I really fell in love with these beautiful boab trees. We camped next to them, I took photos, I sketched some, and then when I got home it was time to design the quilt. I played around with the design for many, many weeks and eventually came up with my 5 big trees, a smaller tree in the distance, and then the really small ones right on the horizon line, which give you the feeling, I think, that you can step into the quilt. Most of the fabrics in the background were pieces that I painted, and then I cut them up into diamonds. I particularly enjoyed constructing the trees. I loved using all the different patterns. I kept quite strictly to my colour scheme, although it was tempting to keep adding more colour. I was very aware of where the light was coming from and how that affected the colours, trying to keep one side much darker. For each of these segments, they were made individually and then I appliqued them back together, so it was much easier to fit them underneath the sewing machine. The bottom part of this quilt is made out of silks. Many of these were from my daughter's dresses, and once again I painted the fabrics to get them to fit into my chosen palette. So here we are back at the rainforest again. I hope you've enjoyed this visit to see my work, to see to learn a little bit about painting fabrics, and I hope you're adventurous enough to start out on your own journey. Thank you.